This, what I'm going to do is just show you, I've got a system connected here. This is what we call MTX editor. And it may look complicated, but it's really not. First time I saw it, and I come from AMX and Control 4 and Kaleidoscape world, I thought, what in the world is all this stuff? But Yamaha in the Pro Audio department or division is known primarily for mixing consoles. So if you've ever been to a major show like Elton John or Foo Fighters, or you've been to the Grand Ole Opry, or you've been to Carnegie Hall, or most larger performing arts centers, Broadway, they use our mixing consoles because we're known as the global leader in mixing consoles. We're also the largest musical instrument company in the world. A lot of people don't know 1 out of 4 instruments sold in the world is a Yamaha, and we're 6 times larger than our next competitor. So one would think Yamaha knows a little bit about what things are supposed to sound like and how to make good sound. So essentially, our DSPs are set up like a console. And much like a typical distributed audio system, you have all your inputs here. But in this case, we have the ability to set our input levels based on the source, okay? Whether it's like a microphone I've got over here and you're talking, you can change the input level. Or a computer that I'm running Dante Virtual Sound Card, or a MusicCast box, or a cable box, whatever. So you essentially have all of your input channels here. Now, one thing about Yamaha DSPs is we can have inputs in a lot of different formats. We can do analog inputs, we can do Dante inputs, we can do balanced analog inputs, we can do RCA inputs, and then we make our own digital interface called YDIF, or Yamaha Digital Interface, that basically is a 16-channel digital audio bus. And the DSP does all this conversion back and forth. So it really doesn't matter what kind of sources you have, Yamaha can handle it. So just kind of quickly going down the screen here, as I said, these are all your input channels. And the MTX5 allows you to have 24 inputs, okay, plus RCA inputs, all right? Plus there's an SD card player built in. You could put music files or announcements, things like that. So it has a lot of mixing capability. And these can be divided up into mono, typically for microphones, or stereo, like, again, for your stereo sources. The first few channels on our DSPs are designed primarily for microphones. So I don't know how many of you guys, maybe we can just ask a quick question and they can respond in the chat. How many systems, do you guys use, or do you guys install that use microphones, right? For paging in a restaurant, or announcements, or presentation space, things like that. So we tend to recommend on an MTX5, for example, use the first 8 inputs for microphones because they have a lot of processing built in. You have analog gain for the microphones. You have phantom power for microphones. You have all kinds of gain settings, digital gain, EQ, gating, compression, very sophisticated feedback suppression system, and what we call a Dugan auto mix. And this is a very sophisticated thing that comes out of the pro world that will allow you to have up to 8 microphones running through this, and it sets the gain automatically for them no matter how many people are talking. Nobody has to do anything, okay? So again, recommendation, if you're using microphones, you use the first 8 on an MTX5, and the smaller processor MTX3, use the first 4. And you can see here, as we move down the line, there's lesser and lesser processing. That doesn't mean you still can't have a bunch of microphones, but you just don't have all the microphone management features, okay? As you keep moving down downstream here, obviously with audio sources, like my computer, or my MusicCast player, or a Sonos box, or whatever, they don't really need any processing. You just want to send them in by themselves and just distribute them throughout the system. Okay, makes sense. Seth, you want to keep an eye on the Q&A? I just saw one pop up. I don't know if somebody had a question while we're talking.
I mean, it's a real quick one about YDIF, and it was from Michael. He's asking if YDIF, if you're using that going to and from, does it introduce much latency into the process for, I guess, for the audio?
Great question, and it does not, because it's full digital bit for bit. and the sophisticated digital and analog circuitry that's in the MTX, I can take an analog signal in and it'll keep it in analog, it'll convert it to Dante and convert it to YDIF. Now, YDIF is designed primarily for in-rack wiring. It's not a network topology, it's our own audio bus. So the advantage here is using our amplifiers, which I hope you would use with our DSPs. You can run a single Cat5 between the DSP and an amplifier and get up to 16 channels of audio, zero latency at all. Same thing as if you've got a Dante amp that's remotely located, as well as a YDIF amp that's in the rack. The DSP manages all that clock syncing so that you don't have any issues. Okay.
You don't need to worry about running a bunch of analog cables from the output of the DSP, the MTX. You can just one Cat5, pop into your amplifier, all your audio, and everything's handled. It's awesome.
Yep, exactly. Great point. I don't know about you guys. I'd rather do less work better than more work crappier, if I said that right. Right. So just doing Cat5 for audio for 16 channels definitely makes a lot of sense. Okay, so kind of the way our input structure is set, and my recommendation is once you get these input levels set, you don't necessarily need to ever change them. Okay, again, you guys have done enough audio systems that you don't want to get your input level so high that it's clipping, right? Red is bad. So once you get those set based on each one of your sources, and the same is true, you don't want it to be so low that you have no output. Okay, so my recommendation is to get those set, and you can also just type in a value here. We won't be able to go over every little detail here in the time we have. We kind of have an inside joke at Yamaha with these products that the good news is there's 100 ways to do things. The bad news is there's 100 ways to do things. So you just have to kind of figure out which way and stick with it. So, okay, we're going to keep going down these tabs, right? And this is the signal flow throughout the DSP. So main input tab sets your input levels and your output levels. Okay. Input gives you all that microphone processing that we talked about earlier. Okay. Matrix. All right. This is probably for people who have not used our DSPs, the most challenging thing to understand, but it's the most powerful page. In a traditional audio distribution system, whether it's a house or a commercial project, you typically have one source per zone, right? That could be a TV, it could be, you know, MusicCast, a Sonos box, whatever. That's the tradition, right? In a house, why would you ever play two things at the same time? Why would you play your MusicCast and, you know, the CD player at the same time over the same pair of speakers? Doesn't make sense. But in this case, because we're mixing microphones, you might mix a microphone over on top of the music. So basically, a matrix is a zone. So my zone 1 here, entry, I have all of these inputs available to it. Okay. Currently, I just have MusicCast playing pretty much everywhere throughout my example here. Okay. So think of a matrix as a zone. And I can put in here as many sources as I want and control the levels of them. Okay. And once everything is mixed in that zone, now I have a master output. As you can see here, I've got a little keypad connected. And this is zone 3, my dining room. So whatever all those sources are playing in here, I have master volume over all of them. Okay. So really very powerful. And I can turn sources off and on per matrix or per zone. Okay. So really very powerful. You can do a lot of things on this one page. Source selection to a zone, mixing of all the sources in a zone, input level of all of those, and output level of the final mix. Really very powerful. Okay. The zone output, this gives me things specific to paging. We do make a paging microphone. That's a Dante mic. So in a typical restaurant or a pizza place, a donut shop, a cafe, you know, order 2, come on up, it's ready. you can use this page to set up all of your paging. We have what's called a ducker built in, which is pretty cool. And this will allow you to say, okay, when music is playing and somebody starts talking on the microphone, I want the music to decrease in volume fairly quickly, but not abruptly, so that somebody can make a paging announcement. One of the keys behind a DSP like this is minimal user interaction. Unlike a console at a concert, you've got somebody that's constantly running the board, constantly doing faders, constantly pushing buttons. With a DSP, you don't necessarily have that, and you have a lot of automation built in, okay? So that's kind of what ducking does. We do have another feature that's kind of cool. I don't see it used that often in the typical hospitality, restaurant, sports bar, things like that. I have seen it used in museums. Basically, this ambient noise compensator is you would dedicate a microphone in the space to measure the ambient noise. And if the noise level increases, you can say, I want the volume to increase in that room. And as the noise level goes down, the volume will decrease. Okay. Looks like we got another question, Seth. Oh, you're muted. Can't hear you.
Sorry, there we go. Fancy audio stuff. It's from Dominic. He's asking, can that only duck one audio source? And says, what if you have multiple background music possibilities?
So in this case, this particular DSP is set up to duck two sources. So you can set one to be, say, Musicast, and the second one to be TV. Okay. So you can have two sources per zone duct. Okay. Hope that answers that one. Okay. Router. So this think of, when you look at a router for internet, what is it doing? It's taking a signal in and routing it or distributing it to various endpoints. This basically is doing the same thing. But where this can be really handy is, if you notice, I have dining room 1 and dining room 1 sub. Well, I want those to be linked together because I want to control them with one volume control. Wouldn't make sense for me to say, to the restaurant owner or the bartender or, whomever, okay, you got to have two volume controls for this one zone, right? Doesn't make sense. So I can actually link those two together just by this, right? Really simple way to say, okay, these two rooms, dining room 1 sub, bar and bar sub, they're all going to be on one fader. And that's essentially all you're doing here. Everything else is pretty much one-to-one. Okay. So we give you that ability. You can also use this. Let's say you've got a big room. I've done this with warehouses. Okay. Where there's, 50 speakers in a warehouse, a giant, whatever, Amazon size warehouse. And I can say, I want, 16 channels of amplification all on one fader because I've got a ton of speakers that I want to drive with one fader. Okay. So a lot of creativity and flexibility here as well. This also has a built-in oscillator so that if you're not getting audio out of the system for whatever reason, you can actually use this built-in test tones that the DSP is going directly to the amp and then out to the speakers. Okay. Output. This is a really cool page. Okay. So you guys know in high-end systems, when you use satellites and subwoofers, typically you have to have, precise phase adjustment and in some cases precise delay or room EQ so that the satellites and the subs blend together and sound like one speaker. Where I see this used typically, so like this dining room 1 and dining room sub, maybe the subs are mounted 20 feet away from the main speakers, whether it's a surface sub or a ceiling speaker. I can actually just say, okay, well, my sub is 20 feet away from the main speaker, and I just type in 20, and it will calculate what the exact delay needs to be. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to understand the relationship of the speed of sound through, air or whatever. You can just set this up automatically and have a delay. Really simple. But the most powerful part of this is speaker processor. So remember that point earlier, we think we know what things are supposed to sound like, Yamaha. Well, we do make a really great selection of all kinds of speakers for commercial applications, whether they're ceiling, surface, pendant, column line array, and subwoofers. So you want to go in and look like a rocket scientist and make the best sound possible, which I think we all do, right? We don't want to go in and do, halfway sound for our customers. I can come in here and say, okay, my entry level, I'm going to use a Yamaha VXS. Here's my whole, whoops, clicked it too soon. I want to put just a sub in there. I'm going to put, because it's outside, I'm going to put VXS5. And guess what? Yamaha engineers have determined here's the proper phase characteristics of that speaker, and here's the frequency response to give optimal performance. All with a click of a button. You don't have to go in and do all kinds of advanced parametric EQ and testing and listening and all of this. It does it for you. So, how much easier can this be? Here's one for a ceiling speaker. Notice a little bit of a difference. 5-inch surface, 6-inch ceiling, right? And so you have our pendant speakers, our line of ceiling speakers, basically all of the Yamaha speakers that are in the line, including our subwoofers. So really very powerful to do. So literally within a few minutes, you can optimize the sound of all of these speaker systems. However, there are some of us propeller head tweakophiles that do want to go more advanced. I don't necessarily recommend this because you can really get into trouble if you don't understand how EQ and phase works. But I've typically only used this maybe to blend a subwoofer a little bit better. For example, here's our dining room sub, and you see, because it's an 8-inch ceiling sub, you see the crossover point 40 to 100, and it's matching with my ceiling speaker that's coming in at 100. Well, maybe I want to just make a change, and you can see how that's dragging that. Maybe I want the ceiling speakers to play a little lower or maybe a little higher, whatever the case may be. Again, you don't have to. I will tell you that engineers at Yamaha have told me, and I believe this after doing this for so many years, that the presets that Yamaha's designed are going to work in about 95 to 98% of the applications. Okay, so again, really quickly to give you optimized sound. Okay, effects, very rarely see this used in most commercial applications. Basically, you have two effects channels that you can put reverb or an echo in. I've used this maybe a couple of times in large presentation spaces where the interior designer has over dampened the room with sound panels. And while it sounds nice for speech, because you don't really want an echoey room for speech or presentation, it sounds horrible when they're listening to music or playing back a concert on the TV. So in this case, I can add a little reverb in to kind of liven up the space. Okay, DCA. This is a cool feature that allows you to control multiple inputs or multiple outputs with one button or one fader. Seth and I were talking the other day about a particular install where there were several microphones in a project, and they couldn't figure out how to control the input level of multiple mics. Well, I can do that right here. So I can say, I've got two microphones, if you remember back here, right? Mic 1 and mic 2, okay? I can still control independent levels of those mics right here, okay? See, I can control the level independently if I want to. And you can give them that control on a Control 4 touch panel or our keypads. But let's say there might be a situation where they've got both mics, people are talking at the same time, Dugan Auto Mixer's doing its thing, balancing the level, but I want to be able to control the level of both of those mics. That's what this is for. And I just have a knob on one of my keypads, okay? So I could assign multiple inputs, okay? I can assign multiple mutes. And then a real popular one is zone out. So this can be one fader to control as many zones outputs as I want. Okay. So a lot of flexibility there. Like we're okay. Everybody's still awake, doing good. Okay. All right.
A good use
So-
case for that zone out DCA is brought to my attention. If you have a stereo, like one of these bigger venues with a stereo zone, and you have a sub channel, so you'll have three channels coming out of the MTX essentially, and you can group one of those zones. Zone 1 can be a stereo zone. Zone 2 will be a mono zone, and so you can have a DCA group A could be your zone 1 and 2, and one fader can raise and lower that group of speakers without having to give subwoofer control over to the customer, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Exactly. It's really a very powerful way to group level control as well as basically muting or on-off control as well. Okay, so let's look at one other thing real quick, and then we're going to look at how to build a system. So you have a couple of tabs up here, external IO and XMV. These are basically showing our YDIF channels. You see it's a loop. Okay, so out one to the amp, whatever other devices, and all the way back. YDIF 9 through 16. Analog, if you're happening to use an analog amplifier, or you're using the analog backup on our systems, and Dante as well. And this is just patching our various Dante channels. Okay. So I have actually two types of systems going here: YDIF to my amplifier and Dante coming into it, or into the DSP. So again, using our amplifiers makes it easy on the wiring and easy on the setup. I can just go to my XMV tab and say, okay, just a 4-channel amp, 4x140 in this case, and I can say, need to edit here. Oh, forgot, have to go offline to edit. I can say, all right, I want out 1 to go to 1, 2 to 2, pretty basic here, 3 to 3. The point being here is I can not only label these, I can set the gain on the amplifier, but I can make all of my assignments right here in the software. And as we said before, it's a lot easier just to do a Cat5 than make a bunch of balanced connectors. Okay. And this is the same whether it's YDIF, analog, or Dante. Really, really simple. Let's go back online. Give it a second here. Okay. And also this page, as you can see, will show you the input levels to the amplifiers. Oh, hit the limiter there once. All of these have very sophisticated input and output limiting. So whether you're doing a commercial project with these or a residential project or whatever the case may be, you have a ton of protection circuitry that's built into the DSP and the amplifier to help avoid any kind of shutdown. Okay. It's really very powerful, because the last thing we want to do is do truck rolls, right? Okay. Seth, anything else you can think of before we go to how to just set up a system?
No, that's a good review.
Okay. All right. It's like the fire hose review. So
yeah,
we can always do one-on-ones with people, or have additional sessions on these. And I mentioned before, you guys have any projects or anything that you're thinking of doing, please feel free to reach out to me or Seth. Yamaha and Blackwire work very closely together with our sales teams, and we have a dedicated design and engineering team that we can actually do the design for you, all the way down to the bill of materials, the tap settings on the speakers, amplifiers, all of that. So you can go in with a coherent design and an easy way to place the order. Okay, so let's go offline. By the way, that can be confusing to people too. Online means I'm actually talking to the system. Little blue lights here, right? So I have a DSP and amp, a couple of keypads, and I'm actually online talking to that. When I go offline, they turn green, which means I can still communicate with them and they're on my network, but I'm not getting real-time feedback. Okay, that's always been a little bit of a point of confusion with people. So the good news is I can see these, right? If they were over here, they're on the network, but they don't have an ID, or if there's nothing over here, that means I'm not on the same network, or they're not addressed properly, or whatever the case may be. So let's go new. Don't need to save that. Okay. So interestingly enough, you see these things are online over here. My editor software knows they're here. And then you can do all this programming without being connected to a system. You don't have to be connected. In fact, I could turn all these off and they would disappear. This is your key, this network tab here, to determine if you're talking to a system or not, or whether you can see it. I think we all know enough about networks. If it's kind of like your phone. If it says, hey, I'm not on Wi-Fi, you're not connected to a particular network. So let's just say those were blank. Okay. Then what I could do is go up here and go to my network setup and make sure, I've got all these different network connecting capabilities. The editor software is smart enough to know which one's physically connected. Now, some of you guys might have a computer like I do. I have another computer that has USB-C as well as standard USB-A. I think that's what it is, right? And so if I have both of those connected, I'd have multiple connectivity options here. But in this case, it just knows I've got this single gigabit USB-C connector. Okay. All right. So
one thing on that discovery there, that is using like Bonjour. So it's a broadcast type discovery. It will not go across networks, i.e. VLANs, and it will not go over a what's it called, a tunnel of any type. So like I'm connected to mine and the office in Phoenix right now, and it's it does not discover, but there is a way that you can go in there and say, here's the exact IP address of these units that I've set up. So
yeah, good point. If there's any higher level of sophistication on the network, you're going to have that same level of knowledge to be able to connect. We tried to make it simple so that you're on the same LAN as the system that you're uploading to or programming or making changes to. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to leave these on, right? This little thing is kind of cool. When you hit that, it'll flash all the lights on the front of the DSP. So let's say you've got multiple amplifiers and you're not sure which one you're talking to, you can always just do that and it'll flash. So little helpful things. Okay, so let's walk through the system. So we'll call it Blackwire next. So here's where it's going to ask you, what kind of devices do you have connected and how are they connected? It's always going to have WiDiff on the DSPs because every DSP has WiDiff. Okay, so in our case, we're going to put one MTX5, and the amplifier we're using is not a Dante amp, so we're going to put that in. You pretty much, unless you're using analog backup, which very few people need to use, you never need to do anything here in this middle part. I will tell you, it's easy to get tripped up because amplifiers are listed over here, just like they're listed over here. I've made the mistake before of going too fast and saying, okay, I got an MTX5 and I got a 4140, and forgetting that I'm telling the system I have the amp connected analog, and I'll get halfway in the program going, where's my amp? Can't see the amp, can't talk to it. So just a little word of caution. In this case, we don't have any Dante pieces connected. These bottom pieces are basically analog to Dante converters, and then our Dante amplifiers. If anybody wants to get into a deeper dive of the advantages of Dante, I can be more than happy to set up another call for that. Essentially, you can remotely locate these amplifiers. You can put them anywhere on the network. So if you've got multiple buildings or maybe a house with the main rack and a pool house, and the pool house needs speakers, instead of pulling long speaker wire, you just stick the amp on the network, put it out in the pool house, and you're done. Makes it real simple. And in this case, I've also got an MCP little keypad. We go next. Now then, something really cool. Because my editor already sees these online, it's going to say, okay, well, let's just make this the ID that's already there. Okay. You can ID them anywhere you want. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I like to use low numbers. So in my case, I like to start with 2 because instead of starting with 1, some DHCP routers that are 192.168.1.1 sometimes will get confused if you start ID with 1. So I just tend to do them in order. Do your own, nomenclature of how you want to do it. I just tend to start like this. Okay. And the ID setting we went over in the previous presentation, but this is all done with dip switches on the back of the unit. So it's a hard code. This just gives you a little, quickie down and dirty, reminder. Here's how you set your IDs. Here's your wiring. I'm not going to use the term dumb it down. Nobody needs any help, right? This is just showing I can actually change the order of YDIF devices if I need to. There's another reason for that. I won't really get into it now. It's for external boxes. But I think you can see here, being able to do everything this way, as opposed to changing cables and moving things around in the rack, is a heck of a lot easier. MTX 5 does have a card slot in the back to add all kinds of different cards. Could be an analog IO, could be acoustic echo cancellation. You see a ton of different cards that are used primarily in the commercial space. Mostly I see an analog IO card being used because there's more analog sources. I do have a couple of keypads here. I think I've got them done correctly. So these are just our little keypads, and you can name those if you want. Bar, office, and then finish. So you can do a little diagram, okay, that you can hand to the technician, especially, if you're using our keypads, it's kind of easy to do. Tells you, here's your digital control panel, which are what these little keypads are called. Here's the ID and the dip switches on them. Here's your YDIF bus. So again, just pretty simple. It's nothing, ultra fancy, but it's a nice little piece of documentation. Okay. Okay. So we got a system. Got a couple of questions.
Yep, 2 of them actually pretty easy. Dominic asks, if you don't have a backup config, can you pull the config off the MTX? Absolutely. When you go online, you get 3 options: new config, saved config, and then go online from devices. So when you connect that way, you go from devices. To device, from device, or new config. Those can be password protected, by the way, also. And then Michael asks, if you have a third-party amp or something like a PX3, can you select generic or similar from the analog connected? Yes. So the analog, do that? Well, the analog outputs are active all the time. Yeah. So when you go back to device config, whoops, yeah. You wouldn't choose anything here because the analog outputs are on all the time. Okay. And that's something to kind of remember, is that you have all of these crazy routing options within the MTX, but on the 5, you have the 16 zone outputs. That's it. Right. On the 3, you have 8, and 8. That is it. So that's very important to keep in mind. Those are mono outputs as well. So if you stereo, you're taking 2 of them up.
Yep, exactly. So under the analog tab, these are always on. Okay. It knows I have a 4140 in there, so it's asking me, do I want to use the analog backup in addition to YDIF? Okay. Again, this is just kind of a redundant system. But if you have some PX3, right, which is just a balanced input amp, then yeah, you just plug it into whatever you want because the analog outputs are on all the time. Okay. In that case, for example, you wanted to use outputs 5 through 8, nothing would show up here. Nothing would show up here. You would just connect it and know that outputs 5 through 8 are on those 5 through 8 betas. Okay. Okay.
I had a real quick follow up. I don't know the answer to this one. Is there any possible way to get around the password if you were taking over a job, or do you just start over? Call Yamaha.
Yes. Yeah, you'd have to call Yamaha. Nobody's ever actually had to do that, but I understand why, because I've gone through that with other control system companies. There is a way. So yeah, there's a way. Never had to do it though in 6 years. When I worked for AMX and when I was an integrator as well, so I was an integrator for 15 years before I went to the dark side of manufacturing. I made it a point to provide every bit of documentation, all the source code, all the routing stuff, all the passwords, everything. I sold them, right, as part of my whole system, because I felt it was, the customers buying my design, my products, my programming, my everything. Well, a line item of that is all the software and everything else. So they're buying it. And it's funny because I used to tell customers, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I want you to be able to take care of your system because you've already paid me for it. And then finally, one customer said, don't be so negative. And I said, what? Why don't you say if you win the lottery, I won't see you anymore, because either way, you get hit by a bus, you win the lottery, I'll never see you again. So thanks for selling me all the source code. So kind of a long-winded answer. Okay. So a couple of little things up here. What is this thing? This blank, and what is this little camera? These are what's called presets. Okay. And you need at least one in every system for the system to work. And that could be a preset that you just call start, whatever. What's a preset? A preset is, and I've got to hang on, like, change to that. Sorry about that. And let me bring this guy back up here. There we go. There we go. Using two screens, it sometimes doesn't know what to do. Think of a preset as a macro, okay? Much like you do with Control4 systems, you hit one button and 100 different things happen. Well, it's the same thing here. And you have up to 50. So let's just call this one open, okay? And let's just call this one close, okay? All right, so I've got two presets in here, okay? I'll get to the assignments here in just a second. I want to make sure we get through this before my time is up. So what does that mean? So now, anytime I make a change, right, with anything, this little edit light's going to glow green and say, hey, you just made a change on this preset. Do we want to make that a preset? So open might be, certain things on, level controls, whatever the case may be, right? I'm just jumping through this. So I can say, yep, I want to store that as a preset. So now every time I go to that preset, all of these different things are going to happen pretty much instantaneously. Okay. So let's go back and just look at that. Close, there, it just changes instantly. Okay. Okay. So what's the benefit here is you can let the Yamaha DSP do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to like the open scene. What do you want the open scene to be? I want the music cast to start playing. I want the bathroom to go to this volume. I want the outdoor to go to this volume. I want so on and so forth. And you set all the things within the Yamaha system to do that. The rest of your Control 4 programming is doing what? Telling the TVs to come on, setting the HVAC, turning the lights on. But you're not having the program within Control 4 all of the things that you want the Yamaha system to do. You get your Yamaha system programmed for what you want it to do, and then just use a single button push on the touch panel. Is that pretty accurate, Seth, the way you see it as well?
Yep, it's one of the most powerful things that you can do in there. Just let the Yamaha do what it does best, and then let Control 4 do what it does best.
Yep. Okay. Pretty simple. You have the ability, you know, you can name things just by double clicking. You know, let's see. If I can type right. Bathroom, bar. You guys kind of get the idea. Okay. So remember I said before, let's set our input levels, make sure those are correct. Okay, MCAST. Okay. We've got our levels set, so on and so forth. Let's say this is patio. Okay. But, oh, wait a minute, patio, I want that to be a stereo zone. I don't want this particular zone to be mono because we're gonna, you know, because the way the layout is, I want a pair of speakers out here and I want that to be a stereo zone. So I can go back up and say, oh, let me configure my inputs and my outputs. Okay. Maybe you see it defaults here, the RCA inputs to stereo, but I want that patio to be stereo. Now watch what happens down here. Okay, and when I go to my, oops, let's see, output tab, or is that, there we go. My bad, that's on the zone tab. So now my patio is actually a stereo output zone. Okay, and as Seth said, you only have 16 total outputs on an MTX5 and 8 total outputs on a 3. So if you need 8 stereo zones, or you want 8 zones with satellites and subwoofers, and you want the subwoofers to be actively powered by dedicated amp channels, then you need to choose your DSP accordingly. Okay, 16 mono outputs that you can make. You can group combinations together as stereo zones. Okay. Matrix, we're not going to really get into that yet because that's a little more programming. Zone, you know, again, do we have a paging mic? We didn't put one in. We don't really have, we're not going to really use ducking here because we're going to let the hostess turn off the music manually in the front to make pages. Router, this is all pretty much a one-to-one system. We're not really doing any subwoofers, or we're not driving multiple zones. This is pretty much the most basic, type of system, the way it's going to be. Okay. Output. All right, here's where we would say, okay, in the bathroom, I'm going to put a 6-inch ceiling speaker. In the bar, just clicking here, I'm going to put, if you use somebody else's speakers, God forbid, you can leave it at default, or you can leave it flat, or you can say, you know, I'm putting in a XYZ 6-inch ceiling speaker, so maybe I'll start with the Yamaha setting and make some adjustments. I don't necessarily recommend that, but I have seen people do it. Okay. Go back to the bar. We want that to rock, so I'm going to put in an 8-inch two-way. That'll do about 110 dB. Okay. Don't really need any effects tabs. DCA, we talked about that. I want to have one level control for my 2 microphones. Okay. So again, fairly straightforward here with just a couple of sources. And remember what we did up here? Anytime I make a change, this is going to show green to say you made a change. Do you want to override it? Yes. Okay. And again, my close, see, it goes back to what it was before. So you can see how powerful these presets are. Okay. Got a question?
Sorry about that. Michael's asking, you can still assign 4 channels of amplification to a single zone if you had 4 large speakers, but without using more zones. So if you had 16 zones of audio, but every one with a 4-channel amp to power 64 speakers. It's a lot of speakers.
Yes.
You could do that.
So yeah, so you can do that in, again, remember there's 100 ways to do things. I can do that either here, okay, and say I want this amp to be that. Okay. So now my output 1 fader, this is routing over Y-diff. Now I only have 16 faders of Y-diff. And I'm not going to say you have an unlimited number of amplifiers you can put in, because there is a limit to the number of devices in these systems. But what you just saw here is I'm saying, okay, now my output 1, this guy right here, is controlling all channels of that XMV 4140. Does that answer the question?
Not sure, there's no feedback. I guess gives a thumbs up if you have the question there. I mean, there's so many ways to do that I can think of. Like I was thinking, if you had a Dante amplifiers, you can pipe it out that way, assign all the channels the same.
Yeah,
All sorts of
again,
stuff.
it's just decide how you want to do it. And it depends on the system configuration. Okay, so remember we said earlier you can do that also in the router. So I can say I want those
Yeah.
4, but then I don't need to do it here. I would say, because I'm using all 4 outputs, right? Okay. If I do it this way, my router, oops, where am I? There we go. The router's taking precedent. Okay. So
It's really, I'll show here in a second when after David wraps up the signal flow on this thing. It is pretty crazy when what you can do inside this processor. And then it does tie your hands a little bit, but also there's almost infinite amount of flexibility in what you can do with this.
yeah, so like the example before, maybe it's outdoor speakers, right? You've got a bunch of outdoor speakers and you want those all on 1 volume control. You can either do that via the router, or you can do it by saying, let's leave this all 1-to-1, keep that simple. And I want this amplifier to be my outdoor. So now out 1 is controlling all 4 channels. But the other thing that's cool here is maybe some of those speakers are closer to the house than others. Well, now I can say, oh, the speakers that are closer to the house, let's play those lower, because you're just setting the gain on the amp. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, this is all just done in the software. No changes, with wiring or anything else.
Dominic's asking, how can you configure for bi-amped speakers with subs? I think kind of the same way, right?
Well, that's done in, well, again, two different ways. So if you're doing satellite and sub, if you recall, based on my previous system, I did something like this. Okay. So this first output is sat, and this one is sub. Okay. So this is I want to make output 1 control both of these, and output 3 control both of those, output 5, so on and so forth. This is the way I do it, and I've only got a couple more minutes. In my matrix tab, when I do it this way, I'm going to assign my volume control to this matrix output. Okay. And when I do that, it's actually going to control the output level of both of these. Okay. Let me go back to my system real quick here. So you can biamp a main speaker because Yamaha allows that on some of their speakers, which means, you know, not with subs, but the high frequency driver has its own amplifier section and the low frequency has its own section. Or you can call biamping for a full range main speaker and a subwoofer. Okay, so here's my dining room 1 and dining room 1 sub. Okay, and what I've done is I have assigned a level control. Find the right one. There we go. So let's look at this real quick. 3 and 4, dining room 1 sub. And I've assigned this one fader. Okay. Through the router to control both. And you think, well, how's that going to work? So I'm turning that matrix fader down. See, I've got a little keypad set up here just so you can see. Okay. And my final output of these two. And I'm just using these output faders to balance the level between the satellites and the subs. Okay. But my one matrix fader is controlling both of them. So where this is also cool with presets is maybe I want Sunday brunch to make the sub be a little higher. My music just changed, sorry. Okay. And right, because I want a little bit more low frequency at a low volume, and I can make that a preset as part of my preset. Okay.
While you're there, Dominic's asking where the crossover is managed for doing the high low on the speaker split.
So that's managed. So in this case, the dining room is a VXC6 ceiling 6-inch speaker with a subwoofer. And under the advanced tab, you'll see it comes in at 100 hertz and plays to 20K. The subwoofer is an 8-inch ceiling sub. It crosses out at 100, really steep slope, 48 dB, you see, almost a cliff, and 40 hertz. And that's all done here. If you're using somebody else's speakers, then you would have to just go in and say flat, and then go into the advanced and set it yourself. Okay, guys, I have got to jump. I apologize. Seth, make sure you provide everybody my information. Thanks, guys. I'm available for discussion. Email me, call me, and we can talk about projects. And if we need to do a deeper dive on some things, just let me know. Okay.
Yeah, let us know through whatever feedback methods we have, and we'll get David back in here if we need to have a good discussion on something like Dante audio and that all that fun stuff. So we can definitely do that.
Sure. All right, guys. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of the week. Right. Okay, bye.
Thanks, David. All right, we're going to pick up kind of where he left off. Mostly, I'm going to bring up that signal flow diagram because it really helped me understand when I was working with this, how the system worked, how it moved audio through, and more importantly on my end, it was kind of like how I'm going to program a driver around this thing, because as I stared at it and as I looked at it for a long time, I realized that it was a little more complicated of a system than it appears to be when you look at just a single rack unit or 2RU unit. As we kind of already discussed, this is generally how signal flow works on these diagrams. It goes left to right. So you have your inputs on the left-hand side, kind of color code things at the top. In inputs at the left, you've got the input patch panel basically in there, so you can actually route different inputs to different channels if you needed to. Really, it's where your Dante lands. That's where your YDIF lands. You got your input channel, which is your standard fader channel we're all used to. It's got a fader at the bottom. And then you kind of move into this green section, which is the matrix, is what he was talking about. And after that, you've got your zone outputs with a little bit of EQ stuff on them, some other sends that come back in. I think there's some, that's where the effects return hit. You go through the router that David talked about quite a bit. The output channel, again, I think there's more EQ, more stuff you can do in there. With more gain control and gain staging. Just all sorts of stuff, all the way to the output ports. And then you hit the amplifiers and we have more volume control and everything. So gain staging on these things is really important to really know what you're doing when you get inside one of these systems up. I always like to start with the input ports, kind of flat line everything out, make sure I've got good signal coming in, and going out, and then start working on this. If we're going to talk to the Control 4 driver and everything, this system absolutely must be set up and working before you start monkeying with the Control 4 system, because it's not going to be a good day if you start doing that. The Control 4 will kind of mess things up along the way. So I want to keep an eye on that. Let's see. This does highlight a couple of things that we are controlling with the driver. First off, we do have the mixer, which is your global input into the system. So as you come into the system now, one of the things we did mention on the zone outputs, you have 16 outputs. That's a cutoff. It's a hard limit. On the mixer inputs, you do have a hard limit as well. No matter how many Dante channels you get on this thing, no matter YDIF, whatever inputs you can find to put into this, you still only have a mixer. I think on the MTX, I think it's like 24 channel. The other one is a little bit more, like 30 channel or something like that. Keep an eye on the specs, because if you're doing stereo sources, you're taking up 2 channels. So keep an eye on that. We do offer a little wire thing on like a summing cable on our website. I think we still have those laying around. That can put them. I think Atlas Sound has some as well, but you can take a single source and sum it out and go down to mono and put it in as well. Matrix send is the other control that we operate within the Control 4 driver. And then the zone output. Those are the main 3. Those are where I would start talking about control of the MTX system. Another big one that we talked about was DCA groups, both input and output groups. The input groups are post fader. I think they're right before the matrix send. I'm not too sure. Zoom way in on this little thing, but they do pick up there. And then you've got your zone output groups as well. So, I mean, your output groups, which is the last fader in the chain. And as we were talking about, that's a good example, was the 2 stereo zones coming in, and you needed to control a stereo zone and a subwoofer zone. You need to control all 3 with 1 fader. You can use that with a DCA group. Same thing if you had like 3 microphones, you wanted to turn them all off in a group, you could use that with a DCA input group. And then the matrix out, this is another control point that we're now offering on the driver as well. I think David outlined a couple of different ways that was useful for control. These 2 blue ones are new, and we've just kind of introduced them. You'll see them in the driver today. I should have that up. I've got one more little thing to kind of do and test for mutes feedback from the MTX. If it doesn't, if you're triggering something else external of Control 4, the feedback coming in is what I've got to do for mutes. And after that, I'm all done. And then of course we have outputs as well. So we're actually controlling all of these things with our driver and wedging it into the Control 4 system. Just kind of quickly go over this. We've already gone all over this. These are just where those things that are on the graph end up on the MTX interface that we were just looking at. David went over that quite a bit, and there's some decent Yamaha training videos. If you haven't checked those out, we have links to those on our website as well. Control 4 caveats as we move into the driver discussion here. Control 4 doesn't do mixing, so keep that in mind as you are putting this system together and bringing audio into the audio that needs to be mixed. Control 4 has no idea that there is a way that you can have two audio sources playing at the same time in one zone. It doesn't cross its mind. It doesn't understand that. And it doesn't do mono audio very well. So we have a driver that has all of these inputs and outputs on it, but you may have a microphone that's one channel, and then you wanted to do a stereo channel, combining two other channels together. Control 4 still sees those two channels that are there, and it still thinks that they're two independent channels. And if one is doing something, it's gonna pay attention to it. So one thing to keep in mind. And then Control 4 wants to be in charge. Director is director. They named that, well enough. It's got a good name. It does what it says on the tin. And it really likes to take over what is going on in a project. I think you see a lot of that in the driver designs that are out there and that exist. And I think you see that a lot in the way that Control 4 approaches things on how they use their system. So they're the first one in line. They're the single source of truth. Nothing else in the system can tell it what to do. It tells everything else what to do. And that's a design philosophy. There's nothing wrong with that. But what we've done with our driver is that we've kind of taken a step back after looking at that crazy design or diagram that we saw earlier, and said, let's just let each system does what it does best and stay out of the way. So over on the Control 4 side, we've got like AV control. We've got automation, we've got unified control surfaces, we've got the iPads, the remote controls, everything syncs together and looks the same. You can hand that to any client. And the MTX, we've got audio routing, does it really well. DSP mixing, does that. Control 4 doesn't do that at all. And it's got some simple control options. So you've got the little what are they called? The YSB, not YSBs, there's something, keypads that you can connect to it. And the idea behind our driver is that the Control 4 system is going to tell the MTX, hey, do this. And the MTX is going to give some feedback. The MTX can also, from these keypads, you can turn up the volume, like what David was doing with his keypad. He was using that little round dial to turn up and down volume. That's going to report back to the Control 4 system and tell Control 4 that zone is raising and lower the volume. So you can actually use these in conjunction with a Control 4 AV control system. Let's just jump right into this for the driver install. I'm going to switch over to the Windows machine here. Let's see if I can get that to come up. Hopefully you guys can see it. As David was talking, I missed some questions, and let me do that before I'll move the question box over, and I will try to keep an eye on that. If you raise your hand, I might not see it, but if you ask a question, I'll keep an eye on the screen over there, and if it pops up, we'll get it there. Hopefully we see not sure what we see now. Hopefully we see okay, good. I think you're seeing the Control 4 Composer, the MTX editor open. I've gone through and just connected to our system, and I just cleared everything out. So this is just a basic system that you would have right off the bat. Like, it's just the MTX 5D, that's it. There's nothing else in there. And I'm just starting my job programming today. Let's see, on channel 1, let's just say we had a mic, say a lobby mic or something like that. Channel 2, let's see, well, I was just going to try and match what I have up here, but it really doesn't matter that much. Let's just say there's another microphone here. We'll say mic 2, channel 2. I'm just going to name it channel 2, and then this one will be channel 3, just to help move things along here. All right, I will get into those drivers are in a second here. But as I was talking about, you want to set up your MTX system, get all your gain staging done, bring your levels up before you start trying to integrate with the Control4 system. All of this needs to be done first. And it's easier before the Control4 driver gets involved, because then it'll start doing stuff that it needs to do to work properly, that you won't be able to, I mean, you can come back from, but it's easier to start from here. So once you get everything set up, you can mute these and test your signals and everything, then install the Control4 driver, and it will integrate with this MTX system. I think, oh, here's one thing that we talked about briefly. This is what the matrix looks like when you first turn on. So we've got the matrix zone 1 here. This is the blue zone, and then I think as you go down, it'll change the colors of each one of these. So this light blue zone, zone 1, this is everything that is playing in here. You can see that the matrix send input coming into the lobby here. I can turn that down, I can turn it up, can disable it, enable it. And what you're seeing here is actually the matrix that we utilize in the driver to control what audio source is playing. So like most of everything that you see in the system is going to look like, these first 4 channels here. You're going to see one channel on. When you switch to the next input, it'll switch to that input. That's just how Control4 and matrices work. But you can't have this. You can't have every channel. It's not going to work. So we have a little subroutine that once you set the driver up, it'll go through and clear all of this out, and it'll wipe everything out, and you can start from 0. And that's kind of where I like to start from on most of the stuff, just because it makes setting the system up a little bit easier. So with that, let's go ahead and drop in the driver. I've got a couple of rooms here set up in this little training room thing. I've got MTX core room that I'm going to put the main drivers in. I've got room 1 and room 2, just for two random zones. I've got a couple of our stereo input drivers in here, stereo 1, stereo 1, 2. I guess I can delete this one. Delete, because those are down there, and I can connect those up to like maybe the Control4 outputs, something like that. And then these are special drivers that we have for the channels. So channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, these are just mono input drivers, and I'll show you how those work. They're right over here when you go MTX channel input and MTX stereo input. Those 2 drivers, they're like little wedge drivers that go between your sources, like these CD players that are right here, and the MTX core. So I'm going to go ahead and install that in right now. Hopefully there's no errors. I am running on a very, very hot off the press beta version of this thing. So first things up, you put your licensing in, everything gets taken care of that way. You've got the driver version here. This is 3.3.1. I think 3.20 or something's on the website right now, but this is this week. This will be today if I get adventurous. And then we've got a little state thing here. You should see a checkbox here. Should tell you check, and there should be a little heart here, which doesn't mean that we love it, but it does mean that there's a heartbeat. And if it misses the heartbeat, it'll drop this out. We also support both RIP and RS-232 control for both the MTX 3 and 5D. The reason for that is very important. IP is great, 232 is better. But if you're using Dante and you need to have audio streaming on a Dante network, you might want to have that segregated off on the side. We're seeing a lot of these video distribution systems come to market that only have one Ethernet output on them, and they will broadcast the video stream and the Dante over it at the same time. And if you plug that into your main network, Dante's fine. You can do Dante on a 100 meg network. That's fine. If you start plugging in 4K video or 1080p video streamers, that's going to be a problem on your main network. And Yamaha doesn't allow you to move one of those, the 2 network ports they have, over to another network. They are both have to be on the same network. So the only option you have at that point is RS-232 control, and I would highly recommend using it. There are some special instructions in here about RS-232 control somewhere. about how to set that up. They're not, yeah, here it is. All right, it must be set at 1115 200 for the baud rate. So there's a way you can do that in the system remote control. It's right here. You got to bump that up. And let's see, I think that's it for this. I've got to update that documentation for the new control points that we have. The next thing you're going to want to do is type in the IP address, which is going to be connections over here. We got 2.168. I think it's 139. Let's see. Yep. So it's connected in. It's doing some interrogations, figuring out what it's connected to. You're going to see a lot of this stuff kind of like change around. We've got a pretty important thing here for channels inputs to ignore. We'll get into that later, but for now, that's there. This is kind of a universal, well, it is a universal driver. It's named that way, but it will do both the MTX3 and the 5D. So as it interrogates the system, figures out what it is, it'll show and hide and put bindings on for the things that you need for each system. So if I go back and look at the core driver here, you can see I've got all of the channels and presets and everything. All those bindings go in. I've got my room bindings in here as well for the outputs. So all of these are like you've seen. There we go. Normally on any other matrix and everything. These are a little bit different. You may have noticed something like this with the old the Sonos drivers used to have something like this. This is just an RF connection that we're going to connect between our little drivers that we have over here. Like this is channel 1. We're going to go from here to channel 1. We're going to go from here to channel 2, which is here to channel 3. And then are there any, looks like there's some stereo in drivers here. So we can take this and use stereo 1 in, we'll go here, and then we'll use stereo 2 to go here. And that's how you put it, use the left and right, like the ones that are on the unit itself. Not necessarily a stereo channel, but because you can reconfigure this entire system to basically combine some of these here. But what we're talking about are the inbuilt stereo 1 left and right, stereo 2 left and right on the MTX. And then a good, like I see most people bring these over to like maybe Control 4 or something like that. So we find whatever Control 4 device is in my system, EA3 audio out, why not? Just plug it there and there. Now you have Control 4 audio going into this. It'll go into this driver. It'll go back out to the MTX system and be available in whatever zones we have. Let's go ahead and set the zones up. This is pretty straightforward. We do provide the audio outputs, although I don't know what use those are. I always use these, and in this case, I don't really think there's any reason why you wouldn't just use regular room bindings like this. So yes, I'm just going to go here, room 1, audio endpoint, and then for audio volume, we'll use room 1 as well. Audio volume, is that right? And then we'll just do 2 zones just to have fun. Audio volume. Oh, wait. There's 2 different room 1 and room 2s. So I get for messing my system up here. All right, so audio volume 1 here and audio volume endpoint here. That's right. And then that would get really confusing in a minute when we went to go do this. Let's see. That's room 2. We need to go to room 1. So again, for doing it live, I could just left it set up and not shown you guys any of this thing. All right, room 1, and then I guess there's only one room 1. Okay, cool. Fun. And it's still connected to the whatever random room that was, but I'm not worried about it. All right, we've got those set up, those in the system. Doesn't really have to be that order, but the next thing you're going to want to do, and I'm going to bring up the MTX here so you can kind of see what it's going to do. We're going to hit on the actions button, we're going to hit configure matrix. And you're going to see, you can already see it happening on the MTX software. It's clearing everything out. And that's just going to prepare it for use with the Control4 system. Now, what that's doing is just disabling all of the matrix inputs here. See, they're all just being turned off. The matrix sin volume levels aren't changed. So those are still available for us to use. But what it's doing is it's just going through and just systematically just turning everything off. And this is a 5D, so it's got quite a few things on here to turn off, plus the effects channels. But this is just going to prep it. While it's doing that and taking its time over a VPN, Michael asks, can you connect a stereo source into the mono input? For example, hallway. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at that while this is doing its thing. Over in our bindings, you'll see if I click on channel 1, it's still got a stereo 1 thing here. So like if you had this CD number 2, let's just do that one, and going into channel 3 and 4, I guess would be the stereo channel. I should probably do that. It's an example. It's already bound to CD number 2. So there we go. CD 1 is going to channel 2. Let's just take this off. Oh, okay, yeah. You don't want that there. Disconnect. Where I do want it to go is so much stuff. But I can't find anything. All right, CD1, I want it to go to the oh, that's why. It is that doesn't make any sense. Why is that there and not here? Channel input. Room 2. Okay, there it is. So CD, okay. I want it to go to 3 because 2 we're going to use as an audio. All right, so CD, here we go. CD 1, we're going to switch this over. We'll disconnect CD2 for now. Perfect. I should have deleted those out and started over 2. It would have been less confusing. All right, so 3 is going to be a dual channel. What we can do is just to set that up real quick, I think you have to go offline for this. So to go offline, go to project, and you have to go to system MTX configuration. And here's where you can set your inputs and outputs up. So we have our input channel set up, and we're going to use 3 and 4. We're going to change those to stereo because that'll be a stereo driver there. Michael, I see your question. He says, I don't want to confuse you on what I'm doing here. You can use a stereo source and physically sum the audio with a summing cable or putting the wires together, whatever, and physically connect that to, say, a single MTX channel. So channel 1, and bring it in to the system. What we have to do over here in Control4 is connect the stereo input and just tell Control4 this is a stereo device, because it has no idea and it doesn't understand that you have a single channel to go to. So virtually, we're doing whatever we want in Control4 land. Physically, you need to connect your CD player or whatever into a single channel. And in this case, it's channel 3. we're connecting CD1. It's going to go to channel 3. Now, channel 3 in our case, I'm going to set it up to be a stereo channel, but before I saw your question come up over there, I wanted to answer it before I went further because it may confuse you. We'll do the other CD player on channel 2. How about that? And that'll hopefully answer your question. All right. So once you do that, then you have to go back online, and then you have to say push to the device. Here's that from device setting. So if you get on a network, you can get from a device, but we're going to go to the device. We're going to push that new configuration out to it. And while we're doing that, I will go to this channel 2, and we'll connect this stereo input into that CD2 player, or CD2. It's confusing because it's a little out of order now, but whatever. So CD2 will be on channel 2, and then CD1 will be on channels 3 and 4, because that's the trick. We use the odd channels, and we're going to ignore the even channels. I'll show you how that works in a minute. Back over here on the MTX, now you see right here, we've got, back to our main mixer, it's a little easier to see. We've got our channels 1, channel 2, channel 3, and 4. They're grouped together. You got one fader for both of them. So internally in the system, it's taking those two things, putting them together, penning one hard left, one hard right, and making you have a stereo source through the system. Over here on the MTX system, let's just go to look at the core and rename. Well, we don't need to rename it. It's going to show up in the navigator that way. But we've got channel 1, channel 2. This one is actually just going to be our CD player. So I guess I can rename that to, I can't do it here, crud. Rename CD2. And then this one will be CD1. And then we had this one as our lobby microphone, right? So, I mean, I'm going to leave it named that because that really doesn't matter. Here's where the lobby mic, if you rename it lobby mic, the UI button that is displayed will show there. So I'm going to go set some of this up. Let's finish this out before we get too far ahead of ourselves. One of the things that we've got to talk about with the MTX system is that, and Control 4 in general, is that when I raise and lower this level here, do you guys see those two volume controls going up? Let me turn it on. You see the two volume controls going up and down on that one mono zone. Oh no, not only do we have inputs that are mono, we have outputs that are mono. And when Control 4 sees two things coming back, because Yamaha is not, that when you send these commands in, Yamaha sends both commands. They're telling us that channel 3 and channel 4 are updating, and they don't tell us that that this is a stereo zone. It's an API request I've asked for. Hopefully we'll get it, and then this bit of confusion can go away automatically in the future. But for now, we're kind of stuck doing this. And this is where these input channels to ignore come in on the main driver. When you have two things, one, microphones that you want to have active in any zone, you're going to ignore those channels. You're going to tell Control 4 in zone 1, we're not even going to look at channel 1. That's straight up, that's going to be a microphone. I don't want you to touch it. In zone 1, we also need to tell it to ignore zone 4 or channel 4, because channel 4 is a stereo pair. It's matched with stereo 3, it does the exact same thing. And when you have audio switching going on at this in Control 4 sees that Control 4 will tell the CD player to play, it'll say turn on channel 3 to zone 1. And then the MTX will report back, channel 3 zone 1 is on, and they'll go, oh wait, channel 4 zone 1 is on too. Control 4 will look at that and understand it to mean that the device, something is switched. The audio source is switched to channel 4. So now it's moved on to input 4 on its matrix. And all sorts of crazy things will get out of whack and it'll just look like the system doesn't work. But this is our quick fix right now. Like I said, I'm really hoping in the future we'll be able to have an API access to that configuration that we did earlier. Right now I'm kind of in the dark. I don't know what the system is when you set it up. So this is the one thing you're going to have to do. And we do have little tech notes on that on our website on how you can what the situations are where you're going to want to put those in. There's these channels to ignore in. My big two are microphones and stereo sources going into a mono zone. You're absolutely going to need them every time. If you're going out to a stereo zone, like matrix 7 and 8 right here, this is a stereo zone. When you do your bindings on the output side of things, you're just going to, again, ignore 8. It doesn't exist. You're just going to use 7. And control 4, we'll look at that in the wrong tab. Like down here, if we go to output 8, we could use that as a stereo op. We're just not going to use output 8 at all. Any questions? Let's see anything popping up over there. We are going to go long here, but I'm trying to get to the UI and all the stuff that's in there. There's some new settings here that you see at the bottom. These are those output binding control targets. So not going to spend too much time on this. This is an advanced thing. We do have a long paper on this, on selecting the targets. Leave them on zone 1. you probably will know when you need to go to these other DCA groups, when you need to go to output 1. Matrix out, you can use that. The problem with matrix out is there is no volume or mute control. So you can turn up and down the volume on a matrix out, but you can't mute it. So just kind of keep that in mind. We give it to you as an option anyway. Feel free to use it. I'm not a fan. We have matrix out as well, and output. So I'll show you where those are. Matrix out is this. I'm sorry. Matrix out is here. Zone 1 is your standard. That's what we're using. We're using the zone control over here. Zone 1. And then what else we got? So I would stay open so I could see it. We've got the outputs, which are way over the DCA outputs effects. So these outputs here, if you switch to out, you could control those. And if you wanted to use DCA and assign channels to input groups, you can control these faders here, as well as the mutes. Now, I am not going crazy on this. When you do this here, when you assign a DCA group as the zone output target, it'll control that, but it's also going to control the same mute. So it's going to be group A on the fader and group A on the mute as well. I couldn't think of a good use case for us to do that, split them up. But on the mixer driver, the UI driver, which will pop in here, you can do that. If you need control for a different mute group and a different input and output group, you can do that absolutely on here. Dominic's asking, do you not suggest to control any microphone levels from control 4? Well, you can. Control 4 is just going to control it like any other source, though. Like if you activate a microphone, control 4 will activate the microphone, and that's fine. But you're not going to have any music playing. It'll just be the microphone. That's it. So why ignore the input? Because we don't want control 4 to control the microphone. Guess is my answer to that. If you ignore it, control 4 will ignore any feedback that comes from the MTX about that. We can still send it commands. We can tell the MTX to turn up and down the volume on a matrix, on this matrix zone, but like right here. But with that set, control 4 is going to see the feedback come through, say I'm set to ignore input 1, zone 1. I'm not going to pay attention to it. It's going to just leave it alone, and that'll be the end of that. Matrix configuration. Couple caveats with this one right now. When you are using remote connection, remote director or whatever, the new enhanced connection on the new controllers, this does not work with. So I've got to figure out another workaround for that. It's next up on the list of things to do. But getting the new control targets in there is a higher priority. You right now must be connected locally or have a VPN connection in to activate this configurator. I think you can load it up, but it just won't work. Sorry. We developed all this before we knew they were going to switch over to the new remote access thing. And here we are. So we'll find a workaround for it and get that out soon. These are the way the interface works. It works in groups. So you can have these groups of panels, essentially. Let me make this window just a little bit bigger. I tried to a second ago. Okay. You can have up to, I think, 10 groups with 10 panels in each one of them if you wanted to. So, say you called this one microphones, which we only have one, so I guess it really doesn't matter. And you could add a panel onto it. You can add a slider panel in. You can change the color of any one of these things, and you can change the icon type, and then change the name. And this is all what appears to the customer. This is not live, so it just kind of doesn't do anything. I think it will get updates, but it doesn't do a live. You can't have that here for a live configuration. Neither is this control over here. This is just to kind of give you a visual representation of what you're going to hand over to the customer that'll be in the app without having to like refresh a bunch of times. Here's our MTX IO configuration. So these are the targets that we have already gone over, the global channel mixer. So if I set it to this, set it to channel 1, hit close, I'm going to save my configuration, run back over here. I'm not on the right tab, but you can still see it. You see channel 1. If I go to, oh, crud, let me get it up fast enough. I think I've got to show it in this room anyway. Let's go to room 2, navigator, listen, modify, and take a look at the mixer levels driver. We'll show that in there. Okay. Say refresh navigators. I should have that up in a second. I don't know how well this is going to work. I'm going to try it though. Let's see, where is the program? There it is. And we'll have to switch sources here. Just give me a second. Well, you can't see it. I'm just take my word for it, I guess. So keep an eye on the I'll try and get these up at the same time. I was trying to do that earlier. The MTX level here for the lobby. Listen, mixer levels. I'm just using my iPad that I have sitting right here. And if I control the volume, you can see it kind of zooming up and down. I can activate the mute, turn on and off the channel from that first thing here. So now that I came back to this page, it's refreshed with the new data. And so you can see it's 81%. It matches what I see on the interface. You can do share screen from iOS, but yeah, I can. Can I do both at the same time? Oh yeah, I can. Shift. Okay, hold on a second. Right, hold on. Shift. Click. Can't share multiple windows that way. Wonder if I can do this one. Can you guys see this? And so what? Those two. Does that work? Yeah, I think you can see that. Wrong one. So yeah, probably can't see it now because it's over. Yeah, maybe you can see both of them. I'm not too sure. Anyway, and it works both ways. So if you're moving the slider on the MTX using a control pad or anything here, you can see that you do get feedback on that. That works across all of the other control points that we talked about. You can go and change this to the channel matrix send, the zone output, the DCA input, and the DCA output group. So these three, I guess these three are kind of new. No, these two are new. There's one more that'll be added on here, the matrix output. That's what we're missing. So those three will be those three are new. On the DCA input group, here's the example I was talking about. If you wanted to use volume group A and mute group C, I have no idea why you'd want to do that, but there you go. You have the ability to do that as soon as you save the configuration. This will now operate. I think that was input DCA input groups. So if I ramp this up and down, yep, there it goes. And the mute will mute C, which is kind of crazy, but there you go. No idea why you'd want to do that. I'm not sure there's much more we need to go over on this other than you can just, buttons. Yeah, this is fun. And some of the other advanced configurations, you can turn off things on here so you don't have to display levels or anything. This can just be a button group that you have on the panel. We just say, this can be links to your presets, right? So when you go in, you can configure up to 4 buttons. It's kind of an arbitrary amount, but that's what we've got in there now. You could just have like start, I don't know, combine. Like if you had a lot of guys use these for room combine, and then maybe a shutdown just to shut everything off. You can use this to actually just quickly control macros in Control 4. You can tell it to turn off the room, the zones. You can tell MTX to trigger a particular preset if you wanted to. So all of that's built in. And then kind of like when you hit save config, and then on the UI interface, you have to go kind of in and back out, but it'll show you the buttons that you have there, and you can over in your connections, you can actually bind those buttons to whatever you want. Button 4 is a ghost button. It's just there because that's what goes in when you do one of those, but you can bind these up to a keypad, or or some other not a keypad, some other programming control if you wanted to. One thing to keep in mind, I guess, if you had more than one MTX, oh boy, there's questions coming in. I should have managed these a little bit better. Okay. I forgot where it was. One thing I was going to say. Oh, if you had more than one core driver, I guess, and you needed to have different of these mixer levels going to different core drivers, you can do that here. These bindings will grab whatever, I think the first, it does like an auto bind to whatever the first one is in the system that it finds. But if you needed more, just keep an eye on that. We do have now nice little Blackwire debugs built into our drivers. Eek. No, that one's broken. Let's see if this one works. They will print out a bunch of nice information about the project and maybe help us find problems. If it sees a problem, I try to program this little debug thing where it'll flag you and say, hey, this is missing this, or this is not working. I'm trying to automate this in the future where this is better, but we'll see. Not sure why it doesn't work on the other one, but I'll go figure that out before we publish the driver. Michael says, would you be able to use buttons to recall a Dante stream? I don't think so. You could, well, let me take that back. So the Dante stuff that you set up in here for your IO, where is that? External IO, right? Yeah, Dante. This, you have to be offline to set this up. And this is just, so you can't think of Dante as like Dante is a dynamic thing. It is pretty much going to be a patch cable for you. You cannot program this and how this routes into the system. It will route the Dante stuff will route into the 16, or I forget how many they have, 24 Dante inputs on this. Once they're in there, it's up to you on the MTX 5D to assign those to channel inputs. So, we're looking at that. We're going to assign this to Dante Stream 1. We're going to go to the next one and assign it to Dante Stream 2. I suppose you could use the presets to recall these particular inputs into those channels and then route your audio around another different way. But again, it's still this 24 channel, or what is this? Yeah, 24 channel mixer plus the couple of other things on there. Yeah, it's you don't have very many input options to do that. So I guess you could. I guess the short answer, I don't know how well that would work, because when you have a Dante stream, unless you're combining it, like you can't say this one is going to be Dante's channel 1 and 2. It doesn't do summing within Dante. It's just streaming the raw audio. Hope that makes sense. Eric's writing, if we had a volume control to each of the sources, you know what? I don't like Zoom. I do like Zoom. I do love this program. But if you guys want to like raise your hand, I can just bring you guys in for audio. I might have to do this first. And then we can just ask questions that way and talk about them, if that works for everybody. Eric's says, if we have a volume control to each of the sources, when the sources are recalled, do the volume controls come back to what it was for the particular sources? Yes, if you save the preset, it'll do that. If that's what you're asking, Eric. You have to set that, you'd have to save that preset up. One good example of that is, I lost my, there it is. David kind of briefly went over this, the preset function. Down here at the bottom, you've got a power on default and an emergency recall. You can also trigger these from the front panel. So like, I would say make one of these like in your company, maybe number 50 or something. Your company's like, when I left here, I saved everything in this preset, and that way you can trigger that from control 4. Just put everything, this is like everything back to 0. And then, you could maybe even have that set as the power on default. So when it comes back, but for the most part, when this thing powers down and it powers back up, everything goes back to where it was. It doesn't, I haven't noticed it like resetting to a default program. If I were to unplug the power from this right now, plug it back in, this channel would still be on that level. If that makes sense. I think that clears out the channels. I didn't see anybody raising hands. Are there any other questions I can answer about this? I know we kind of flew through the, there we go, Eric. I'm going to bring you in. You just have to unmute when you get in. You there? Got no audio. You're in, but I don't hear anything. Let's see. Michael says he does have in-depth questions, but yeah, no, ask away, Michael. I can stay here for a bit if everybody else, if there's anybody else that has questions, I can pick off the low-hanging fruit ones too, if need be. I think the only thing we really didn't go over was the.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, Eric. Jeremy, hang on for a second. Let's get Eric's question first. But when you unmute Jeremy, you will be able to talk. What's up, Eric?
This is Paul, but yeah, it's okay.
Oh, Paul. Okay. Oh, it's not Eric. It's Eason too. I was like,
Eason, yeah. We're together. So a question I had was in the UI, or in the experience button UI, if you could go back to that, can you make, so say you make a new group that includes a microphone and a CD player, whatever, okay. Two sources. Yep. And a different group includes just the CD player. can you configure or can you make the connections to when you recall like the presets to trigger the groups essentially? So if like one preset included the mic and then the other preset didn't include the mic, would that reflect in the UI?
No,
Like
this is static. So like
presets?
whatever you set here, it's going to be here.
Okay.
This doesn't relate back to Yamaha in any way other than you telling it what you want these to do right here. We don't have any automation built into the to like hiding and showing the groups. Is that what you mean?
Essentially, like if I pulled up preset 1, I would show group 1, and if I pulled up preset 2, I would hide group 1 and show group 2 for
Yeah,
anything.
I could see that being interesting like use case, especially if you just use this button, kind of what you're
Right.
talking about. Yeah,
Yep.
it could change out things. Yeah, we have some plans for this, but I'm trying to get some of these features knocked out. And then I think one of the biggest things I want to do is make like when you go add panel, instead of adding a button or a slider, you'd be able to add a room combining panel that has a nice interface where you can have like a lot of guys will do like 3 zones in one room and then want to be able to control that under one thing. So that may be a good use case for that, but it's a good idea. I like it.
And we had a recent install with two, well, one MTX5 and one MTX3. We would only need to purchase one copy of the license for the driver, correct?
Yeah.
We can use it both in one C4 program.
Yeah, it's just per project. That's all.
Okay.
Yep.
And what is the cost on it? If you top your head, you know.
I don't know. I'm not in sales.
But
I can find out for you.
no, I'll look at it. I was just curious if you knew.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Cool.
Jeremy, I don't know if you still have a question. You're still muted though, but I can hear Mike. So Michael, let's go. What you got?
Cool. So the application for what I'm looking at this for is it's a residential one. But the guy's fixated on being able to DJ into parts of his house as well, because he's a DJ. And the reason why I was asking about the Dante streams is he wants to be able to have by the pool, by the terrace, and by the like where his studio will be, different DJ inputs that he'd want to be able to recall. And I didn't know whether they should be as group like those preset buttons, or whether they should be just sources, but they will be Dante inputs into the system because of the actual size of the house and where everything is. He'll want to bring them in, but then also because this is going to be powering all the speakers in the house, we'll still have, the conventional, the Control 4 stream so that they can just casually stream music, and they'll do all of that other stuff through this platform as well, in lieu of having a triad or any other matrix which are in there. There will be some multi-channel zones, but I'm happy for basically, because everything's just hallways, bars, it'll all just be mono zones. There's no need for him to have stereo everywhere. That's why I was asking those kind of questions about mono and stereo to try and figure out, if this will do it. And it looks like it's the right thing. But I guess the main thing is that for the user interface, in lieu of actually having as I say, like a conventional Control 4 audio matrix system, this would still feel the same for the person. You could still have a Spotify stream coming out of the core processor, and it would still turn a zone on, and it'd still do all the normal functions, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
And I think here's where what you're talking about. If you wanted to switch those out with input patches, I think you would turn everything off and then say, on this preset, we're only going to recall those input patches that I set up. And all you're going to do, it's going to affect all of them, but all you're going to do is change out the Dante channels. That's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah. No, it's a significant, like the design from the consultant originally was to use QSys and Crestron, but the client's budget didn't encompass that. And so when you guys literally fortuitous that you had this webinar come up, and I was like, oh, that's right. I remember that this MTX driver exists for Control 4, and it's like $50,000 cheaper to do the solution this way.
Yeah. For the bang for the buck on this thing, it's wild. Especially the MTX 3. I mean, it's pretty small, but at the same time, like you get quite a bit out of it.
Yeah.
So
The 16 zone outputs, again, my question about that is because he wants to have big sound in some zones. He's not going to use 64 speakers, but there's like 28 speakers, I think, through the house, and garden and all that sort of stuff, excluding multi-channel zones. And the point was that I want to be able to give, I'm going to use the 8x140s, and I wanted to give each, like in certain rooms, there's 4 speakers. So each one of those wants to have one dedicated channel, but to be able to group them. But then if I want to group a subwoofer in the XMV, because I know in the PX3 you can put your low pass filter in there, but in the XMV, can you have a low pass filter in an existing, like within a group, so it's not a separately adjustable channel?
I don't know the answer. That's a David
cool.
question for sure.
No, that's yeah. Obviously, he had to jump off, so I'll get his email and I'll send you guys through what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I see what you're trying to do. I don't know. I do know that on this one, it kind of does limit you to the number of channels you have out. I mean, you basically have 16 to work with, and that's it. And there's really no cheating it. Like you can duplicate them, like we were going over, but you're at 16 zones, and the mix that goes into those 16 zones is the mix that goes in. It'll come out. And then you have the submix at the matrix where all this, you can, readjust what your matrix mix goes in. But yeah, I don't know, like that'd be kind of tricky.
No, that's cool. Thanks.
Oh, no problem. I don't know if there's much else. Oh, there is one more little driver that we can go over. Is the channel drivers have this little hanging thing off of it, the little microphone. That's an experience icon. If we have a couple of, and here's something I forgot to do. It has a couple of functions where you can just set it to basically toggle the mute on a channel. So let's just say that's zone. Oh no, this is going to be channel 1. So whatever it's bound to is what it's going to do. So I'm going to turn that off. It's set. Let's go back to the right view over here. So now you can see channel 1 is off. And if I bring this up on the Control 4 interface, it gives you a little, there's a couple of options. You have microphone, XLR button, and then you have a couple of colors you can assign to it. So if you want it to be a red button, that's how it would be. I'm pretty sure I already had that in the interface. We're not sharing it now, but here, I can just double click it. That turns things on and off. So it gives you another way to control. This is what we started off with before we did the matrix mixer, the UI. And this is some basic stuff, but it doesn't, I think this kind of has a point where you have to stop and say, okay, I need to do a little bit more advanced things with this. And that's where you would naturally go over to the matrix mixer. So these experience buttons can be used to control the global or the matrix send right now, based on their function. So you can show status. So if I didn't want it to control anything when they tapped on it, I could just set it to that. You can show the icon only, and you can use it to select the source. So I think somebody earlier was asking if you had like an upstream source and how you would wire that in. Say you had I don't know. I don't think there's a real great reason for this, but like say you wanted a button to activate channel 1, and channel 1 had like the CD player or something plugged into it. You could assign the button to do the select source thing. And what it'll do is basically select the source that is upstream from here, whatever is bound into this input here. So if it's the CD player, you push the button, it'll select that source. And that kind of keeps director involved with things. As far as it goes for like a microphone and using these for like simple mic controls, like say you had a reception desk and you didn't want to do the mixer UI, you could just have a button that says turn on the mic, and you press the button and it lights up when the mic's on, that kind of thing. That's primarily what that's designed for, but we've gone a little bit further with the UI portion of it at this point, and I'm not really investing too much time in those mixer buttons. I think that's probably going to wrap up all I had. Is there any other question from anyone else? Raise your hand or type it in, let me know. If not, I'm going to hop back over to our presentation real fast. Not that fast. And just to kind of end things off, and so you guys can get David's information as well off of here. Where'd it go? Right there. We've already gone through all these. RS-232, Dante, input channels. I went over a lot of these slides a little bit further in the other one, but you can also use us. We've got dealer support on all this stuff, and then sales at Blackbar Designs, email support at Blackbar Designs. We got chat, phone as well. A number of trainings are still upcoming. I'm going to do another one of these MTX things. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to maybe divide it up a little bit so it's not a 2-hour training. But I can talk forever. David can talk forever if we had to. I think last time he went like over an hour on his presentation side. So and then I took it for another 45, but it was a little bit different. We did a little bit more on some of the other equipment that Yamaha had. So if you want our emails, I think somebody was asking for that earlier. David is DNOWAK at Yamaha, and mine's Seth at Blackbar Designs. If you guys have any questions, comments, feature requests, ideas, let me know, especially around the driver development side of things. And I'll try my best to answer and get back to you on it. But thank you very much for coming out. I do appreciate it. Looks like there's one more. Yeah, Stanley, can you get a copy of the presentation? The training hub that we have that you signed up for this on, so there's a link on our website. After this gets done and processed on Zoom's end, I just click a button and it just posts this up, so you can grab that there. Okay, cool, awesome.
Seth, the other training, the other video that you were saying that's on your website, the previous one to this one, considering, I guess, my questions and what we've looked at today, is that going to add context or not?
Not so much the MTX. It does. We went over a broad part of the Yamaha lineup. So not just the MTX, we went over the MA stuff, the amplifiers, and barely brushed on the editor software. And I don't know. I can't say whether I did a better job this time. But last time, the presentation I had towards the end is pretty much the same. I kind of got surprised, but David was on the road and I had to set up my system for remote access and everything on the fly. So there's a little technical issues. I was a little bit more prepared today to do that, but he had his system set up where he can show how to use the editor software and all that good stuff this time.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It was good. It was very valuable being on today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for swinging in. If you do have any more questions, just give one of those emails a shout. David can help you on the Yamaha side. We can help you too. It's just sometimes on the more advanced topics, he may know a little bit more on it, and he's got some pretty good ideas. With that said, thanks everybody. I'm gonna hit the end button on this. Okay, yeah, I think there's no more questions. No, that was an old one. All right, thanks everybody. And if, like I said, you have any questions, just reach out to us. Have a great weekend.
You too.